Hi everyone, this is Sydney. What the world needs now. We are honored to have Rebekah Krushnisky of Studio Classroom to shed some light with us today.
Usually people don't think they need God, but they have some need in their life. If we can fill that need first, and then we can draw them to God, are things not going according to plan? But the truth is, God uses all of these things. He connects all the dots. And in the end, I believe this picture will become something very beautiful.
Before we start, please remember to subscribe so you won't miss any of our upcoming programs. Now, please join me to welcome Rebekah to our show.
Hi, Rebekah. So happy to see you and welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm really happy I finally made it on your YouTube.
We first met at the Tainan Holiness Church where you delivered a thought-provoking sermon.
Then I realized that you have been serving in a media mission to spread the gospel through teaching English, singing, and the members' life stories. So could you share with us what brought you to Jesus in the first place?
It's actually a very good question, but my answer is very simple. It's very straightforward. I actually grew up as a PK, a pastor's kid. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a Christian family. I had parents who really loved Jesus. Jesus was the center of their life. From a young age, I saw in big and small things, my parents would pray, and I would see the effects of answered prayer. I have many examples I can give. When I was about 10 years old, we lived up on a mountain in a suburb of Taipei. One day on a Saturday, my father was driving. Our whole family was in the car. So we were just driving down the mountain. It was our usual routes. We were talking. It's a happy day. And then suddenly a van came from behind, hit our car very hard because that van was trying to pass us. He thought we were going too slow. The impact of the collision was so big that our car turned 180 degrees in the opposite direction, went to the other side of the road, to the very edge. If we had gone just about 1 foot more, the car would have flew off the edge of the mountain. We would probably have died instantly. But when this whole thing was happening, my mom just screamed, Jesus. That was her one-word prayer because there's no time to say anything else. And then our car just stopped at the edge of the road, right at the edge. We didn't go over. It just came to a stop. And then we were completely safe. So from a young age, I really saw that God is a good God. God looks after us. God answers prayer. God is faithful. So that was the environment I grew up in. I just never left the faith. I just continued on my whole life. Of course, every one of us, we struggle with moments of doubt. There are times when we ask God, why did you not let this happen? Or why don't you let that happen? I think that is all part of this faith journey. But overall, from a young age, I saw God answers prayer and God is kind, God is loving. So I have continued on this path.
Praise the Lord. It's a miracle that I can speak to you today.
Praise God. Yes, we say that even the people we meet, the things that happen in our lives, God planned it all out. Yeah, I like to give an illustration. A lot of times when we're young, like when we're drawing, we connect the dots to maybe form a picture of an animal or ice cream cone or something. I think God is the dot connector. He already has a visual map of what he wants of our life. But of course, we don't know. So we just go step by step. And sometimes you go, why did this happen to me? Or why am I here? Are things not going according to plan? But the truth is, God uses all of these things. He connects all the dots. And in the end, I believe this picture will become something very beautiful.
You're talking about joining the dots.
One of the dots must have been in Ukraine, wasn't it?
My grandparents came from Ukraine. In the 1920s, during the Bolshevik Revolution, when communism rose all over the Soviet Union, my grandparents, they became refugees and they fled Ukraine for Canada. And then my dad was actually born in Canada. So he is a Canadian-Ukrainian descent. Through God's mercy, we have come full circle. Because many years later, when my dad was in his 20s, he became a Christian. When he was walking the streets of Ottawa, that was his birth hometown, somebody was preaching the gospel on the street. So then he joined a local church and then he gave his life to Jesus. Eventually he became a missionary, and then his church, they sent 100 missionaries all over the world. So my dad was part of the batch of missionaries they sent out. So my dad was the youngest one, and then he came out to Taiwan. Grandparents, Ukraine, Canada, Taiwan. And in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, my dad with his good friend in the States, an organization called Global Vision Ministries, they went back to the Ukraine. So it feels like we have come full circle. So he was able to give back to the land of his ancestors. I actually did visit Ukraine one time with him in 2007 at the wedding of a dear friend. Thank God for these opportunities. Yeah.
That's cool. So how would you like to invite others to come and see the love of Jesus?
I think this is a really good question. And I think the most important thing is need. People have a need, and that need needs to be fulfilled. And I think one of the best ways to lead people toward Jesus is by helping their need. And I give an example, like earlier in the beginning, when you introduced me, you said I work for a media company that uses English and music to share about God to many people. And I want to talk about my boss who just passed away earlier this year in August, 彭蒙慧老师, Dr. Doris Brome. She was originally from Seattle in the US. And at the age of 12 years old, there was a famous pastor, famous missionary from Hong Kong, 季牧师. He came to Seattle and then he shared about in China, there's so many people, they have never heard about the love of Jesus. Who wants to go? And that day in that church, nobody raised their hand, not even one. But one little girl, a 12-year-old little girl, she raised her hand. She said, I want to go to China. I want to share about God to the people in China. And that little girl was my boss, Doris Brome. So at 21 years old, she left Seattle for China. She sailed a ship, went to China. And then due to the civil war in China at the time, eventually she moved to Hong Kong. And then from Hong Kong, she moved to Taiwan. And when she came to Taiwan, originally she didn't plan to teach English. This was not part of her plan at all. She just wanted to play music because she loved music, and she just wanted to be a missionary. But when she was living in Hualien, she started to realize there were so many people who want to learn English because Taiwan was just opening up at the time, and many people need to learn English so that they could have better life opportunities. She saw this great need. What she did is she started a radio program teaching English. And that radio program eventually evolved into a magazine and then basically a media empire called Studio Classroom. What I raised my boss's example is she saw the need. The need was English. Like, people do not know they need God. Usually people don't think they need God, but they have some need in their life. If we can fill that need first and then we can draw them to God, I think that often is a very good way. And then, like my boss Doris, so what she did is she used radio programs, she used magazines to teach English, and many people started reading the magazines. Many people came on her radio programs because they really wanted to learn English. After she became their friends, she invited them to the Studio Classroom events, and then they had youth rallies, they had Christmas concerts, they had kids programs, they had many different programs for different ages, and they all talked about God's love in these events. So she was able to lead many people to Jesus, including many of my colleagues who worked in Studio Classroom. Some are retired now. Some went on to become full-time missionaries, serve in God's kingdom, and many are just like us. They continue to do well in whatever they're doing right now. I have a second example I'd like to share is we talked about the Ukraine briefly. My grandparents were, on my dad's side, was originally from Ukraine. 2022, when the Russian-Ukrainian war began, many churches in Ukraine started to help the people in their communities. Because during wartime, there's a lot of hungry people. There's a lot of needy people. There are a lot of refugees. There are a lot of people who don't have enough money. They can't buy enough food for themselves. So the churches started to aggressively act, and then they started to feed the people in their communities. And then for the people who want to, like in danger zones or war zones, that want to leave to go to safer areas, the churches became like their evacuation cars. They would drive to the dangerous places. Nobody told them to do this. It's just out of God's love. They want to do this. So they started to evacuate people from dangerous areas, take them to train stations, or in some cases, even drive them across Ukraine so that they could go to safer areas. We saw this need. These churches were trying to help so many people. So we started a project in Taiwan called the Good Samaritan Project. And we started to raise money to support these churches because here in Taiwan, we are thousands of miles away. what can we do? What we can do is we can send them money. And then using that money, they can buy the food, necessities, the medicine that the people need, help their communities. Through something as humble as a loaf of bread or a bag of food, many people who didn't know God, they just walked into the church for the first time. They just want free food because who else would give you free food? So they came hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, not just in one church, in many churches, all in these areas in Ukraine. They all walked into church for the first time. So it feels like you're just feeding, but they come to church, they see, oh, these people are different. They have joy, they have peace, and they're so kind. Why are they giving me free bread? Or why are they giving me free medicine? So through solving a need, just to fill some empty stomachs, many churches were able to preach the gospel much more effectively than before the war. I think at the end of the day, the main thing is we have to see what are the people's need and how can we help. Before we tell them, hey, you have to come to church or you have to do this, you have to do that, we look at their need and go, you want to learn English? You can come to the Bible study in our church. We have an English Bible study. Or you're really busy and you want someplace safe to put your kid in our Sunday school. And when we solve the need, people will naturally come. And I also think one really important point is we need to do it with the right intention. We really need to do it out of love. Just really love people. And sometimes I think we all run out of love at times. And this is when we need to ask God, God, give me more love so I can love the people around me.
I pray that God will richly bless you to love those with all kinds of needs. Please guide us in our efforts to bring peace and relief to those troubled regions and make the world a better place.
Thank you, Sydney.
The opportunity to sing you again soon.
See you next time, Sydney. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Please remember to comment, like, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes. See you next week. God bless you.